أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, my dear brothers and sisters. We praise Allah Almighty who has allowed us to be here on what is really a festive night, Saturday nights, isn't it, outside. But Allah has blessed us that you are and we are here in this mosque, worshipping and praising Him, and actually going through such an important personality in the history of Islam. And I think when you go through, when you read his history, Imam Ali radiallahu anhu, you will absolutely be inspired by his life and what he went through. And I think the aim of any author and any storyteller, if you look throughout our history and the people who've written about the Sahaba, the aim is to get across their sacrifices and their situations and their circumstances and make people feel as if they were there at that time and to go through what they went through. Before I begin this noble life, I just want to mention a few important areas. I mean, I think I got the short straw out of the four Khulafa Rashid. Imam Ali radiallahu anhu, his life is without a shadow of doubt the most controversial, especially the period which towards the latter end of his life, his Khilafah. And there is a fantastic book written on this, and the great late Ustaz Khurram Murad, may Allah bless him, he once said that if he had one little misgiving was that Maulana Maududi, may Allah be pleased with him, when he wrote his book on this specific story, it caused a little bit of a revolution in Pakistan, in the Indian subcontinent. If you ever have a chance to read this book, I would suggest you do so. It is one book which has not been translated into English, because it is, as you will see, this life is a very controversial life, the episode, the incidents. And the book is called Khilafat Umariyat. And if you can get a chance to sit down with somebody and go through it, there are some absolute key lessons which I think are so important for us in today's life. Now, why is this man so fascinating? And why is this situation so wrapped up in history that if you read, for example, many books on the Khulafa Rashid, you will see that when it comes to Imam Ali, they skim past many of the incidents because they don't want to analyze them fully. There are a few reasons for this, because Imam Ali radiallahu anhu is actually quite pivotal in 3 or 4 different situations. The first is that during his time came the big clash between what set off the Umayyad dynasty, the Umayyad Khilafah, and between that and what people have assumed the family of the Prophet ﷺ, the Ahlul Bayt. That clash was to continue for about 3 centuries onwards from then on. In fact, the seeds were sown that almost 150 years later, in 750 AD, the Abbasid Khilafah overtook the Umayyads based on that clash of the Ahlul Bayt versus the Umayyads. So that's number one. When you get a clash, our history books tell us that you'll always find people writing different stories depending on which side of the fence they sit on. The English have a phrase, history is written by the victor. And that's true wherever in life we are. And you will find hadiths talking about Imam Ali, talking about that situation, which our muhaddithin, our experts on hadith have said, throw these away. These are fabricated by one side, or these are fabricated by another side. Such was the political turmoil. That's number one. The second reason why he is so controversial and so pivotal, really, to this, is because our Shia brothers and sisters derive their essence from him. The story, the Shia narrative of Islam begins with Imam Ali radiallahu anhu and departs from there on. Imam Ali radiallahu anhu for the Shia is the first Imam. Out of their 12 if you're a 12er. Out of their 7 if you're a 7er. So from Imam Ali comes the split, or the beginning, the seeds of the split between the Sunni and the Shia world, which unfortunately, as we see, switch on the telly, we can see is up in flames in different parts of the world. So again, you will find so many fabricated hadith about Imam Ali from the different factions. The last reason, so 3 big reasons: political turmoil, the different ideologies that emerge from Sunni Shia. The third is many Sufi tariqas, tasawwuf, the ways of tasawwuf. Many Sufi tariqas derive their essence from Imam Ali. He is the founder of so many different tariqas they've traced their roots back to him when they have their sanads and chains. So again you find so many hadiths about him, about his spirituality and so on, that we always have to weigh up. So what's the bottom line between these? What am I trying to say to you? If there's one lesson I want you to walk away from here today, is that please be very careful with stories. Whenever we read any books, it doesn't matter where it's from. The person who taught me hadith, Sheikh Abdullah al-Judayah, is a muhaddith. When he's coming to Seerah, if you take a look at famous Seerah books, like, for example, Tabari's Tariq or Ibn Hisham, you will find so many times you read a particular bit in the Seerah, you go across to check it, you ask or go through the hadith, and actually there is no sanad for it, there is no chain for it. And somebody asked one of the Christian priests I work with, because I work for prison service, I look after the Muslim prisoners in prisons, the imams who run the affairs of Muslim prisoners in prison. One of the Christian priests I work with asked me, what's the biggest difference between Islam and Christianity? Now I think he was expecting me to say, oh, is Jesus the Son of God or not? I said, well, it's very simple. The biggest difference between Islam and Christianity, and indeed between Islam and nearly every other faith, is an Arabic word called sanad, chain. That's the biggest difference, because I don't understand. I said, well, everything in Islam, we will only believe it if it is authentically proved to come from the source. If it isn't, we don't believe it. We say we have categories of weighing evidences. So our Qur'an, we say it's mutawattir. It's coming from so many different sources. So many different Sahaba have narrated the Qur'an in the way that we read it, in the way that this brilliant voice today made it possible for us to hear it. So many different hadith, so many different riwayas, that we say it is impossible for it to have been fabricated. There are so many different evidences for it. Like hadith are put in levels. So one thing very important when it comes to stories, seerah, lives of the Sahaba, it's good to hear stories. But to take hukum from them, lessons from them, we need to weigh them up in evidences. I'm not a specialist of hadith. I've tried to do what I can, but I can tell you definitely in this particular story of this great man, there are so many things that need to be weighed up. And there isn't a book out there that I can recommend to you that has weighed up everything in terms of its chain and its authenticity. Now let's proceed, inshallah, with Imam Ali radiallahu anhu. Imam Ali came from the Quraysh of Makkah. He was in the same tribe as the Prophet ﷺ. He's related to the Prophet ﷺ, the Banu Hashim. And his father is Abu Talib, the uncle of the Prophet ﷺ. So he is the first cousin of the Prophet ﷺ. And Abu Talib had 4 sons. And Talib is, that's why he was called Abu Talib, Aqil, Jafar, and Imam Ali radiallahu anhu. There were 10 years between each of them. Talib never became Muslim. He died after the Battle of Badr. Abu Talib, his uncle, according to the orthodoxy of Islam, didn't become Muslim either. His uncle looked after him, his uncle protected him, his uncle said to the Quraysh when they came to threaten him, his uncle said to the Quraysh, I will never let go of the protection of my nephew. So he protected him. And that deep love that Abu Talib, a mushrik, an idol worshipper, that deep love he had for his nephew made some of our fuqaha in our past, like Suyuti for example, who begin to say that Abu Talib may have become Muslim. So actually there's a slight controversy over this, but the mainstream position is that he never became Muslim. That's what we accept. And we have hadith to that effect. Then we come to Aqil. And Aqil became Muslim after Fatah Makkah, the second son of Abu Talib. He died during the time of Muawiyah, some say during the time of Yazid. And he had 12 sons. And 9 of his sons, of course, one of them is very famous. 9 of his sons died with Imam Hussein in Karbala. So that's, again, very, very close family ties there. Then we come to probably the two most famous, of course, is Ja'far ibn Abi-Talib. Ja'far is an early convert to Islam. So he's converted early. And again, his father Abu Talib, he sees him praying. He says, what is this? And he says to him, stick close to Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, close to his nephew, because he saw the character of the beloved Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And Ja'far, we know because of the very famous story, he was one of the people who went and emigrated to Abyssinia, to Najashi, the Negus, the Christian king. And a very important lesson here, because some of our extremist brothers and sisters, they say, oh, there's no good among the kuffar. There's this, there's that. The Prophet ﷺ said to the Muslims being persecuted in Mecca, he said, go to Abyssinia, for there is a good Christian king. And so Ja'far ibn Abi-Talib radiallahu anhu and quite a few of the Muslims left Makkah, the persecution that they suffered there, and went to Abyssinia. And there they found some security and some peace and so on. And Ja'far, if any of you have ever seen the film The Message, and there's a beautiful part there, it's found in our Seerah books. Ja'far radiallahu anhu is the one who narrates Surah Maryam to the Najashi, and the Negus then draws a line with his staff in the middle of the floor, and he says, there is the difference between us and you is no bigger than this line. And they protected them. And Ja'far radiallahu anhu didn't come back to Arabia until actually the Prophet marched towards Khaybar. So it was quite late he went back. Now we come to, of course, Imam Ali radiallahu anhu. On top of that, of course, he had 2 daughters. So 4 sons and 2 daughters, Abu Talib. Hani, who we don't know much about, and Jumana. And both, there's very little, a few hadith from them, but nothing more than that. Let's talk about Imam Ali radiallahu anhu. There was a famine in Makkah. And Abu Talib was not a well-off man. He was quite poor. And so he struggled feeding his own family. So the Prophet ﷺ, he went to his uncle Abbas, the other uncle, brother of Abu Talib, and he said to him, let's go to my uncle, to your brother, let's go to our uncle Abu Talib, and let's say to him that we are willing to help, we wish to help him. I'll take one of his sons, and you take one of his sons, and we look after them in our own house. And it will make it easier for him to feed his family. So Abbas radiallahu anhu agreed. They went to Abu Talib. They said that this is what we will do. And he said, okay, fine, no problem. I'll keep Aqil and you take whoever. So Abbas took Ja'far radiallahu anhu, and the Prophet ﷺ took a young 10-year-old boy, Ali radiallahu anhu, into his house. And so he grew up in the house of the Prophet ﷺ. That's very important. He was born about 10 years actually before the Prophet ﷺ prophethood. So actually, by the time when he arrived at the time to the Prophet ﷺ, he was very close to the time of the prophethood itself. And Ali radiallahu anhu settled there. There's various different traditions about how he ate food. He was one of the family with Khadija, with the Prophet ﷺ's daughters, with his family. And one day, after prophethood, Ali radiallahu anhu sees the Prophet ﷺ and Khadija praying. Now, he's not seen this before. You know that the method of the prayer is unique. So he sees them doing this. So he says to the Prophet ﷺ, what is this afterwards? And the Prophet ﷺ explains his mission, his prophethood, and then invites him to accept Islam. Ali radiallahu anhu says he needs to ask his father, he needs to sleep on it, and then in the morning he'll ask his father. And that night, Ali radiallahu anhu himself, later on in his life, he says, I had trouble sleeping because I knew in my heart the truth. So I was thinking to myself, why have I even said I'll sleep on it or I'll ask my father? And in the morning, the first thing he woke up, he went straight to the Prophet ﷺ and he declared his shahada. The Prophet ﷺ asked him to repeat the word, and he did his shahada and he became Muslim. And this is what we say, and there's dispute among some of the fuqaha, some of the storytellers about, did Ali radiallahu anhu, was he the third after the Prophet ﷺ? Khadija, of course, his wife, became Muslim. Was he the next one, or was it Abu Bakr? And there's dispute among some. And I think that probably the more authentic leaning towards this is that people have settled both and said Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu was the first adult to become Muslim, whereas after Khadija radiallahu anha, and Ali radiallahu anhu was the first young child to become Muslim. And Ali radiallahu anhu's character you have to now begin to appreciate. He is not someone who sits quietly on the fence. He's not a passive personality. He's a mover and shaker. His passion is very much like that. And during that time, the Prophet ﷺ made a dinner for all his Banu Muttalib, all his clan. He invited them around to dinner. Dinner, of course, is the best way to do, one of the best ways to do dawah. You invite your neighbors around, you tell them about Islam. And that's what the Prophet ﷺ did. He made a dinner, invited the tribe, and talked to them about Islam. And they started ridiculing him, started mocking him. So the Prophet ﷺ said, who will support me? Whoever supports me will be my inheritor. Who will support me? And the young 13-year-old by now, Ali radiallahu anhu, says, I will, Ya Rasulullah. Ana Ya Rasulullah. I will, Ya Rasulullah. And the rest of them laugh because they didn't expect a little tiny, teenager to speak out like that. So the Prophet ﷺ asks again, who will? And again Ali radiallahu anhu says, I will. And a third time he asks, and a third time Ali radiallahu anhu responds, I will. So here you can see the personality of Ali radiallahu anhu. It's like that. And the years go by, and of course you've done this. I think you've all been through the seerah and you've gone through this. Later on, during the time of the Hijrah, the Prophet ﷺ, of course, the Makkah, the tribe, the Quraysh, are plotting to kill the Prophet ﷺ. They decide the way to do it because they're afraid that Muslims have now left Makkah to go to Madinah, Yathrib. So the way they're planning it is let the different clans, different tribes, let them choose one person from each tribe and they'll pounce on the Prophet ﷺ in the middle of the night and kill him. That way, the blame is apportioned. No one can say it was this tribe that killed him. That's how they concocted their plot. But the angel Jibreel alayhi salam alerted the Prophet ﷺ, and the Prophet ﷺ then turned to Ali radiallahu anhu, who made plans for his hijrah, turned to Ali radiallahu anhu and said to him, asked him to sleep in his bed that night. And he said to him, no harm will come to you. And it's an astounding thing to do. Young man, he must have been about 20 years old roughly. So he slept in the bed of the Prophet ﷺ, knowing full well that that night the assassins would come in and would try and kill him. And of course that's what they did, and they realized that the Prophet ﷺ had gone, and the Prophet ﷺ and Abu Bakr of course went off and found their way back to Yathrib, to Medina, their hijrah. Ali radiallahu anhu didn't follow immediately. For 3 days he spent, after that incident, he spent giving back the wealth that the Prophet ﷺ had left in Makkah. Because the Prophet ﷺ, of course, his nickname, his, if you like, the name he was known as by non-Muslims, not by Muslims, by non-Muslims, he was known as As-Sadiq and Al-Amin, the trustworthy. And people used to give him things to safekeep. It's a very important lesson for us. And so the Prophet ﷺ, now that he'd left Makkah, he said to Ali, give these things back to whoever they belong. So the very people who are attempting to, as a mass, to kill him, are the very people who the Prophet ﷺ is saying to Ali that tribe, give them back their valuables. So again, a very important lesson for us. And so Ali radiallahu anhu spends 3 days doing that, and then he marches, actually flees in the middle of the night. He used to sleep during the day and travel during the night, and arrived in Medina barefoot, actually bleeding, but alhamdulillah managed to get back. In Medina now, the Medinan stage of Ali radiallahu anhu's life, and I'll just pick on a few incidents with just Ali radiallahu anhu, just to give us a flavor. In the 2nd year after Hijrah, the Prophet ﷺ married his daughter Fatima radiallahu anha to Ali. He was 21, she was about 15 and a half, and Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu helped him with his mahar, his dowry. The Prophet ﷺ gave him a bed sheet, a leather pillow, and a few pots. So that was all the dowry was. They were very, very poor. And, you know, there is a story in Abu Dawud, Sunan Abu Dawud, where Fatima, as she's walking along, she's starving, she finds a dinar on the floor. She picks it up, quite happy, goes, bakes bread, and has bread that night and gives it to the Prophet ﷺ as well. So it's very, very poor background, very poor. And we also have the story, you know, just after Salah now, we saw people doing their dhikr, the 33 and 34, yeah, Subhanallah, Alhamdulillah, Allahu Akbar, you all do it, you all count it, the tasbih. This came from the story of Ali radiallahu anhu and Fatima. Fatima radiallahu anhu, she was doing the grinding of the flour every day, she was tired, they're very poor, they don't have much, and she hears that the Prophet ﷺ is distributing some booty. In those days when you went out to war, and the prisoners of war were kept as servants, slaves. And people, their tribes used to buy them back. So until they were slaves, they used to work for people. So Fatima radiallahu anha, she goes with Ali radiallahu anhu to the Prophet ﷺ and says, we're very, Ya Rasulullah, you know, my father, this is what's happening, could we please request one little servant to help us? And the Prophet ﷺ says no. He said, I'll give you something better than that. And then they said, yes, what? And he said, say Subhanallah after each prayer. Say Subhanallah 33 times. Say Alhamdulillah 33 times. And say Allahu Akbar 34 times. And that's where this has come from. When we do this, it's thanks to Fatima radiallahu anha and Ali radiallahu anhu that we get the reward here. So again, you know, it's not what he wanted, it's not what she wanted, but she got something better than what she wanted. Because the Prophet ﷺ, why didn't he want to do that? Because he didn't want to send a message to people that he was favoring his family over. Do you see? Very important messages there for us as well. Ali radiallahu anhu always, you know, his nickname, he has many nicknames, and I won't go into them, but one of them is Abu Turab, father of the dust. Why is he called this? Because one day he came home very tired, and he left home, came into the mosque, shattered after working for this farmer who happened to be a Jewish man, came to the mosque and he fell asleep. And the Prophet ﷺ went to see him in Fatima's house, his daughter's house, And she said, he's not here, he went to the mosque. So he went to the mosque and he sees him sleeping on the floor. The floor isn't like this. The Prophet's mosque isn't like this. It's just dirt, soil, sand. And he's sleeping on one corner and there's dust all over him. And the Prophet ﷺ went and touched him on the shoulder and said, wake up, O Abu Turab, O father of the dust. So his nickname held from that. So this is the character of this man. Later on, and I'll just whiz through the three battles, the Battle of Badr, Uhud and Khandaq. In the Battle of Badr, of course, Ali radiallahu anhu was one of the three champions who came out to fight against Utbah and his three. And Ali radiallahu anhu, of course, killed Walid, who was Utbah's nephew, in this battle. And again, renowned then for his courage, his fortitude. Some accounts say, and this is, I tried to track down the accounts, but I think it's, I can't find any authentic narration, and Ibn Kathir mentions that there isn't any authentic, but the Dhulfqar. Dhulfqar means the split sword of Ali radiallahu anhu, very famous. But Allah knows best, you can have a look at the different. But it's reported that in the Battle of Badr, he was given the split sword by the Prophet ﷺ. And he fought bravely there. During Uhud, during the second battle, and imagine the Quraysh, all they're interested in is wiping out the Muslims. That's all they're interested in. So during the Battle of Uhud, the Prophet ﷺ becomes injured in the heat of the battle. And his front teeth are broken. So Ali radiallahu anhu is one of the first few to reach him. He picks up the standard and he protects the Prophet ﷺ. So again, very close to the Prophet ﷺ. When the announcement went out, oh, the Prophet is dead, the Prophet is dead, he's the one who shouted out the correction, trying to stem and control the fear that the Muslims had got at that time. During the Battle of Khandaq, the trench, and it's a nice, beautiful ayah in Surah Ahzab. That Allah says, when they came upon you from above you, from below you, when your eyes grew wild and your hearts reached your throats, and you were imagining vain thoughts concerning Allah, then were the believers sorely tried and shaken with a mighty shock. Such was the fear. There were thousands of them. They'd come to wipe out the Muslims in Medina. And yet Ali radiallahu anhu stood his ground. And it's a famous story when Amr ibn al-Wud challenged the Muslims. Big man, ferocious warrior, renowned for his courage and his fighting prowess. He shouts, who will fight me, O Muslims? Who will dare to stand up against me? And nobody stirred. And then he said, where is your paradise that you say your martyrs go to? Will no one fight me? And Ali radiallahu anhu stood up to get up, and the Prophet tried to hold him back, and then Ali radiallahu anhu asked him again, and then he went, and he cut him down, because he was not frightened. Fear was the biggest thing that held people back, but not Ali radiallahu anhu. He was not afraid of anything. Then we come to, many years go down, we come to Hudaybiyah, and in the 6th century after Hijri, we have the treaty. And again, this shows you the spirit of Ali radiallahu anhu. Hudaybiyah was a triumph for the Muslims, this treaty between the Muslim and the Quraysh. But it was seen as a disaster by some. Because there were the Quraysh, they would not let them go and do their pilgrimage. They said, no, you can come back next year. They made this treaty. So Suhail comes to make the treaty on behalf of the Quraysh with the Prophet ﷺ. Ali radiallahu anhu is writing the treaty down. So the Prophet ﷺ begins, he said, write down in the name of Allah, most beneficent, most merciful. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Suhail said, we don't recognize this word, ar-Rahman. Take that out. So the Prophet said, take it out. Then the Prophet said, right, this is an agreement between Muhammad, Rasulullah, and he said, stop there, Suhail goes. Remember, Suhail was a mushrik, a polytheist from the Quraysh. So he said, no, if we said you were Rasulullah, we wouldn't have fought you. So no, we won't accept this. So the Prophet ﷺ turned to Ali and he said, scrub out Rasulullah, write Muhammad ibn Abdullah, Muhammad the son of Abdullah. And now Ali radiallahu anhu says, no, I'm not going to do it. He said, no, just rub it out. No, I'm not going to do it. I cannot. So the Prophet ﷺ said, show me where it is, and he himself rubbed it out. Because he could not bring himself. It felt like an insult to him to rub out Rasulullah on a piece of paper. So this was the passion with which his character was. Then we come to Khaybar. In Khaybar, you've got to imagine that the Jews had betrayed the Muslims, and they had supplied the enemy during Khandaq with food. Even though they had a treaty with the Muslims, they betrayed that treaty and supplied the enemy with food to attack the Muslims. So the Prophet ﷺ marched on to Khaybar. Ali radiallahu anhu was on his way there, and they tried to lay a siege to the fortress of Khaybar without much success. And the Prophet ﷺ said, he said, tomorrow I will give the banner to one who loves Allah and His Messenger and who will take the fortress. And so everybody's looking to who's this? And the next day Ali radiallahu anhu arrives. And this is in Bukhari. So again, a quite authentic narration. And Ali radiallahu anhu is given the banner. He goes into the fortress. He fights the people there. And in some narrations, he lifts the gates and lets the Muslims in. So he was responsible for Khaybar being taken. Then comes Tabuk. The Prophet ﷺ marches out. He hears that the Romans are gathering an army against the Muslims. So the Prophet ﷺ marches out to meet them. So he leaves Ali radiallahu anhu as his deputy back in Madinah, responsible for his household. And Ali radiallahu anhu says, no, I wish to come with you. And the Prophet ﷺ says, no, you stay there. And now come again, authentic hadith in Bukhari. The Prophet ﷺ says, are you not satisfied that you are to me as Harun was to Musa, except that there is no prophet after me? So again, the closeness. Harun, of course, was the brother of Musa alayhi salam. So he's giving that analogy of Ali radiallahu anhu to the Prophet ﷺ. Then years now go by, Makkah has been taken, and the Prophet ﷺ sends Ali radiallahu anhu together after to catch up with Abu Bakr to go and announce in the Hajj in Makkah the famous Surah Tawbah, the beginning part of Surah Tawbah. If you imagine, if you stand there during Hajj, you can imagine Imam Ali announcing the beginning parts of Surah Tawbah, very strong surah of the Qur'an. And that was Ali radiallahu anhu being asked to deliver it. Then the Prophet ﷺ sends him to Yemen. So he was a deputy of the Prophet ﷺ in Yemen for quite a few months, and thousands became Muslim at his hands. And the following year again he goes to Hajj, and this time with the Prophet ﷺ. And on the way back from Hajj, and that's the Prophet ﷺ's farewell Hajj, the last Hajj, on the way back to Medina at Ghadir this place on the way from Makkah to Medina, the Prophet ﷺ stops. And here now, it all depends who you read. So be careful who you read. But you'll find many accounts of what the Prophet ﷺ said. And I've taken one from Ibn Kathir. Ibn Kathir says, the Prophet ﷺ said, Ali is the friend of those to whom I am a friend. Ya Allah, help him who supports him, and be hostile to those who bear him ill will. Okay, others will claim to you when you read these, if you ever get into this polemical, they say that that's where the Prophet ﷺ passed on his mantle onto Ali. There's no base for that story. We find no chain. Okay, now we come to the time of the Prophet ﷺ passing away. And while the Prophet ﷺ was ill, he informed Abu Bakr to lead the Muslims in prayer. As you know, the Prophet ﷺ then gave away his wealth. He had whatever possession he gave away in charity. Ali radiallahu anhu and Abbas radiallahu anhu, they took him, he was weak, he was delirious, they were looking after him, then he recovered slightly, so he said, hold me up, so they held him up, they took him into the mosque, and in the mosque, the Prophet ﷺ had already appointed Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu to lead the prayers. So you can imagine, as he's coming in, the people see the Prophet ﷺ, and Abu Bakr tries to move back to allow the Prophet ﷺ to come forward to lead the prayer, but the Prophet ﷺ says no. And the Prophet ﷺ leads the prayer for Abu Bakr, and then Abu Bakr leads it for the rest of the congregation. And then the Prophet ﷺ goes back, and within a day, Allah takes him away from the earth. And at that time, Ali radiallahu anhu is with him, Fatima, his daughter, Aisha, his wife, and so on. And we know the story, we know how the Prophet ﷺ, as he was passing away, what he kept saying, verily with the most exalted companion, because the angel was giving him the option for staying or not. And now, the Muslim community, as you can well imagine, is in a state of utter shock. The person, the beloved person for whom their whole life rested, for whom they made their journey of migration, Hirah, for whom they sacrificed everything, for whom they fought their battles, had now gone. What to do? And we know the story, and you've been through the first Abu Bakr, how he salvaged the operation there, how he went to Thaqifa, Bani Sa'id, sat there, and there were discussions between the Aus and the Khazraj about who should become the Khalifa. And then Umar suggests him, and it was a salvage, it was accidental, but it salvaged the situation, and people all flocked around Abu Bakr. Why? Because he was the one who the Prophet ﷺ selected for the prayer. All of the Sahaba, the Prophet ﷺ chose Abu Bakr to lead the people in prayer while he was ill. If there was any indicator, here is one. Leading of prayer is a big thing. And so people flocked to Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, and he salvaged that situation. Otherwise, it would have become quite a big problem for the Muslim Ummah at that time. Now here, I will suggest to you, and I came across somebody who rang me up and asked me to have a word with their son in Leeds, so I went across to try and speak to him. I spent quite a bit of time with him, but it was difficult, because his son had become Shia. And he became Shia because of this story that I'm about to tell you next. So it's important that you understand this, because a lot of people, when you read the books, it's hidden. It should not be hidden. In our books, we have the fact that Fatima radiallahu anha, she went to Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, and she asked, give me my inheritance that the Prophet ﷺ left. So she wanted the inheritance that the Prophet ﷺ had left. Prophet ﷺ had an orchard that somebody had given to him, etc. But Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, he said no. And it's a very important reason why he said no. There are 3 authentic hadith that Abu Bakr was referring to radiallahu anhu. The Prophet ﷺ said, a prophet does not leave inheritance. Whatever it is goes to charity. So this is in the Sharia, this is in the Sharia of our deen. A prophet does not leave inheritance. So you might think, oh, that's a bit unfair on the wives, but that's the reality of the situation. That's why he was so keen when he was on his deathbed to give away whatever money he had. He had 6 gold coins. He said to Aisha, give them away before I pass away. How can I face my Creator with these? He didn't say, I'll leave these for you. He didn't. Because the Sharia, his hadith, say the Prophet does not leave inheritance. And what this young man and some people had twisted his thinking in Leeds, they'd said, oh look, there's a clash here between Abu Bakr and Fatima. But it's not a clash. Ibn Kathir writes that Allah knows best, we do not know. Maybe Fatima radiallahu anha had not heard this hadith. Allah knows best. She asked for inheritance and Abu Bakr said no. She was upset, no doubt. But that was the right of Khalif, and that's the beauty of Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. He did not move at all. He would not move from the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We know this because after the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they came to him, the Sahaba, and they said, Abu Bakr, Ya Khalifa, do not send Usama and his army on this battle. And Abu Bakr said, the Prophet ﷺ appointed Usama. Who am I to change what the Prophet ﷺ said? That was the kind of man Abu Bakr was. He was an absolute stickler for the Sunnah. Absolute stickler for the Sunnah. He's the one who, when the tribes had said, and some of the tribes said after the Prophet ﷺ, some of the tribes had said, we'll pray, we'll fast, we'll do everything, but we're not going to give zakah. We're not going to give zakah. We'll do everything, but we're not going to give zakah. And Abu Bakr said, I will fight to the death any person who leaves even 1 dinar of zakah. And so the Sahaba said, but he goes, no, this is what we'll do. Because once the rock starts shaking, the whole thing will collapse. And that's why during the time of Abu Bakr, the whole thing united because of what he did. He protected the deen. So it's no surprise here. And Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, he came out. Ali radiallahu anhu did not give him bay'ah for a few days, some say a few weeks, but then he did. So some of our Shia brothers, they say, oh look, he never did this. No. He had the opportunity to say anything, but he did not say anything. Instead, he gave allegiance to Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. He prayed behind Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. If there's any evidence that is required, it is that. So I think with this issue, it's a very important issue. There is a very strong principle in Islam which we have to accept. It's a principle of usul al-fiqh. The principle is this: if something is so important in Sharia, then Allah will mention it in the Qur'an or the Sunnah. If it is not in the Qur'an and Sunnah, it is not important in the Sharia. Very, very big principle this. Some of our brothers, for example, I'll give you, it's a controversial, so I don't mean to be controversial, but just think about this, for example. There are 2 hadith narrated by Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, where the Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu says, when the name of the Prophet was mentioned, we used to take our thumb, kiss our thumbs and place them on our eyes. Both hadith are da'if to fabricate it. But even for a moment, if we take them, we say, and our fuqaha have said, well, actually, if the Sahaba used to do this, we'd find it in Bukhari, in Muslim, in Tirmidhi, in Nasai, and so on. Because if all of the Sahaba, every time the Prophet's name was mentioned, they all did this, then you would find it somewhere in the Sunnah. You don't. So this principle is very important. The Shia brothers and sisters say to us, they say, the Prophet ﷺ wanted Ali radiallahu anhu to be the first Khalifa. Well, we say, well, actually, had that been such an important part of our deen, we'd find it in the Qur'an and we'd find it in the Sunnah. We don't. So this issue is not a part of our deen. It's a political matter. It's not a deeni matter. It's a very, very important point. And so they say, Abu Bakr, but where is it that he rebelled? Where is it that he said, no, I will not accept this? This is the character of Abu Bakr, of Ali radiallahu anhu. He's not the person who remains quiet. If he finds something that goes against the Sharia, he's the first one to speak out. But there is no speaking out. Instead, throughout the life of Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, he's the one who gives him advice again and again. He is the one who helps him, Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu consults. When Abu Bakr says, I will fight them, those who do not give zakat. And he himself, Abu Bakr, was about to go in the battlefield himself, lead the battle. Ali radiallahu anhu said, no, if you listen to my advice, you stay in Medina. The Muslim world needs you to stay here, safe. Let us go. That's not the kind of advice that you find someone who doesn't agree with the Khilafah. So it's a very, very important point. Okay, and Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu led the janazah for Fatima radiallahu anha, and Ali radiallahu anhu prayed behind him, gave him advice and so on. And now we come to the time of the Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu's death, and then Umar radiallahu anhu becomes the Khalifa. And during this time, again, the various people give murmurings. Actually, all that goes in one single sweep. Somebody said to me, oh no, Ali radiallahu anhu didn't accept. It's rubbish. If you don't accept someone, do you give your daughter in marriage to them? Ali radiallahu anhu gave his daughter Kulthum in marriage to Umar radiallahu anhu. Do you do that if you don't trust someone? No, you don't. He held him in the highest regard. And Ali radiallahu anhu, this is again in Ahmad narration, in Musnad Ahmad, Ali radiallahu anhu said, by Allah, there is no one besides Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and you, Umar, with whose record of deeds I would like to turn up before Allah. Because such was the piety of Umar radiallahu anhu. And again, Ali radiallahu anhu advised Umar, for example, the calendar after Hijri comes from one of the thoughts of Ali radiallahu anhu. He is the one who put that into the picture. Because when they were deciding where should the calendar, the Islamic calendar start, some people said the birthday of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, some said the death day of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and Ali radiallahu anhu said the Hijrah, the date of the Hijrah, and that's of course what we went with. And then of course, unfortunately, Abu Lulu, and we have the assassination of Umar radiallahu anhu. And now we come to Uthman radiallahu anhu's rule. And again, during his time, we know the Committee of the Six. You went through all of this, yes? The Committee of the Six, and the turmoil that happened then. And Uthman radiallahu anhu becomes the Khalifa. And then Ali radiallahu anhu again stays in Medina, helps Uthman throughout his years, and supports him and gives him advice. Every single fiqh matter, every now and again, Uthman would call Ali radiallahu anhu and ask him, what do you say about this? What do you say about that? What do you say about this? And so on. And he would take his advice. And so we come to I think we went to the end of the assassination of Uthman radiallahu anhu. And immediately after the assassination of Uthman, we have turmoil. And you have to understand, during that time, Uthman radiallahu anhu is in his house. He's surrounded by these rebels. And these rebels aren't small people, they're big people, some of them. We have the son of Abu Bakr, who was in Egypt, who's marched there as well. And they've come, they've collected around Medina first. Uthman radiallahu anhu sends Ali, go speak to them. So Ali radiallahu anhu goes up to them and he says, what is your grievance, what's your gripe? And they said, oh, he's appointing people from the Banu Umayyah as this, as that, and so on. And Ali radiallahu anhu puts their mind at rest. He says, go home. So they go home. Or pretend to go home. One group goes off to Egypt, one group goes off to Kufa, one to Basra. And Ali radiallahu anhu goes back into Medina, explains to Uthman. Within a month, the same group is back again. And this time, Ali radiallahu anhu is very angry. Because what the group is saying is absurd. The group is saying that Uthman sent a letter to the Egyptian governor to ask for them to be killed. Uthman radiallahu anhu absolutely denies that. Ali radiallahu anhu believes it's a conspiracy by those people, so he's telling them, fear Allah, have fear of Allah, but they're not listening. So they come into Medina. Uthman radiallahu anhu, asks them all not to shed blood in the city of the Prophet. So the Sahaba are ready to fight, to defend the honor, to defend the person of Uthman, their Amirul Mu'mineen. And Uthman radiallahu anhu says, no. No one is fighting. And he says in one beautiful speech, he says, if you listen to me, then I say to you, put away your swords. Then he says again, if you listen to me, if you are people who listen to their leader, I say to you, put away your swords. So they reluctantly put away their swords. And the rebel groups surround Uthman ibn Affan's house. And I mean, about 20 days. So it's a huge amount of time. And Ali radiallahu anhu, people are absolutely, what's going to happen? Muawiyah radiallahu anhu sends a message to Uthman saying, escape, I'll send an army. He says, no, you will not. And it's Ibn Sa'd writes, a 90-year-old man, because that's what Uthman radiallahu anhu was, a 90-year-old man who at a moment of order could have ordered 10,000 people or more to come and save him, refused to allow a drop of blood to fall next to the mosque of the Prophet ﷺ in his city, and would rather take the Shahada. And that's what happened. So they came in and they attacked him and they killed him. And so died Uthman ibn Affan, the one whose nickname was Dhun Nurayn, the owner of the two lights. I named my daughter Nurayn because it is such a beautiful name, because he was married to two of the daughters of the Prophet ﷺ, Ruqayya and Kulthum radiallahu anha. So his nickname was the owner of the two lights. And these people, the rebels, with no care, killed him. And now once again there's shock, absolute shock. How is it possible? The Muslim empire stretching from, the halfway across the northern Africa, all the way across to Persia, etc. How is it possible in the very heartland of Arabia for the Khalifa to be killed, assassinated? People stunned. So after about 4 or 5 days, people started coming to Ali radiallahu anhu. Ali radiallahu anhu came out of his house, went to pray. Earlier, while Uthman was in the sort of siege, they asked Ali to lead the prayer in the Mosque of the Prophet. He refused. He said, how can I lead the prayer when our Amir is held captive just down here? So he read on his own. It was such a tremor. Now he came out, went into the mosque, and people flocked. Why to him? Because if you remember, during the time of Uthman radiallahu anhu, there were really only two contenders after Umar radiallahu anhu's death. It was either Uthman radiallahu anhu who was going to be the Khalifa, or Ali radiallahu anhu. If you remember Abdul Rahman in the committee of the six had narrowed it down to two. So with Uthman gone, Ali was the natural leader. So they flocked to him. They wanted a bit more stability. And they started giving him allegiance. The governor of Egypt sent a message, and so on. Bit by bit, people gave him allegiance. So now he's the Khalifa. And Talha and Zubair, the other two companions, are there. They also give him allegiance. He now goes out of Medina. People now say to him, bring the murderers of Uthman radiallahu anhu to trial. And he says, and I actually took the quote directly from, I'll just show you what. He said, why do you not catch them? They said to him. He said, they are all about you. Wherever you look, they're here. They've not left. How should I deal with these people on whom I have virtually no authority? Rather, they are everywhere. They're dominant. Bedouins and others have joined them. Do you see any possibility of me apprehending them? Is there any chance of me getting to them now that they're still here and there's thousands of them? So here comes a big issue here. There are people who said, you must capture the people who murdered Uthman radiallahu anhu. It's only fair, it's only just. A murder has happened, you have to go, the authority has to go, capture the people who murdered him and hold them to account. And here Maulana Maududi makes I think a brilliant point. He said, well, what has that got to do with the whole issue of who a Khalifa is? These two matters are totally separate. One is a political matter of who a ruler is, and the second is a judicial matter of bringing murderers to trial. The two aren't linked. You don't say, well, and that's what they did, unfortunately. Key Sahaba, and this is what Maulana Maududi, he hinted, he says, this is not and we say, and people have said, and Ibn Kathir says, that we say Muawiyah radiallahu anhu, we say radiallahu anhu, was mistaken. To link the two is a mistake. Muawiyah said, we will not give you allegiance until you bring the murderers to trial. Now Maulana Maududi was saying the two things are not linked. Why are you saying only if you do this will we do this? Rather, the aim of Ali radiallahu anhu was to unite the Muslim Ummah, get the armies of Muawiyah and Muawiyah on board, everybody on board, and now he would have had sufficient manpower, sufficient resource to track the murderers of Uthman down and put them to trial. But he never got an opportunity. From day one, trouble was brewing. So some of the people said, no, oh my God, and you can see the mischief making here. Because some people, when Uthman radiallahu anhu had now been killed, they took Uthman's shirt and it was full of blood. And they traveled all the way to Damascus, where Muawiyah was, the headquarters of Muawiyah in Syria. And they went round the streets showing this is the blood of Uthman. Muawiyah, remember, was Banu Umayyah. Uthman was Banu Umayyah. So this is the blood of our Khalifa. And now watch. This is the blood of our beloved Khalifa who Ali radiallahu anhu is not capturing. Do you see the fitna is spreading now? The fitna is spreading because people in Damascus are being incensed. They actually put the shirt on the mimbar to remind people, to get the emotions going. And so the scene is set for two horrible battles. The first is the battle of Jamal, the battle of Hirah. Talha and Zubair leave Madinah and go to Makkah. Aisha radiallahu anha, who had been there doing her Hajj, they came to Aisha, they said Uthman is, the news had traveled now, Uthman is dead. And Aisha then goes with them and with quite a large group off to Basra in Iraq to get support so that they could call on Ali to arrest the murderers. Ali radiallahu anhu thinks this is now getting out of hand, because once she gets to Basra, she'll have the reinforcements and this is potential rebellion. You see, what has murder and arresting got to do with Khilafah? So what Ali is saying, look, give me your allegiance, come on board with me, and you know me, I love Uthman radiallahu anhu, I was there in Medina with him, you know me, and we'll crack down on these murderers and we'll bring them to trial and execute them. But that's not what happened. So Ali radiallahu anhu marches towards Basra, catches Aisha and her army before they get to Basra. Now here, then you get maybe 10 different narrations as to what happened. And I don't know if we'll ever know what the truth of it. And I think there's a brilliant PhD thesis there for someone to analyze the chains and to get to the different points of view. I've had 2 different history teachers and tell me 2 different stories. And these are Muslim historians. So Dr. Farid al-Shayal from used to be in the Markfield Institute, brilliant historian as well. So here, some said Aisha radiallahu anha came to Ali's camp to say, now, okay, I'll agree. But on the way, 2 of her tribes attacked Ali's camp. You see, when you have 2 people facing each other, it just takes someone to throw a stone to the other side and a battle will start. And that's exactly what happened. 2 people from the tribe of Aisha's attacked Ali's tribe, Ali's army, and a battle started, Battle of the Camel. In this battle, many people died. And it is the first recorded battle of Muslim against Muslim. And Ali radiallahu anhu at the battle, after the battle, he won the battle. After the battle, he said, because they said, oh, let's take the booty. He refused to allow them to take booty. They said, let's take the prisoners of war as our servants, as our slaves. He said, will you take the mother of the believers, Aisha, to be your slave? Na'udhu billah. So he says, this isn't like a normal battle we face. They said, are these people who fought you, Ya Ali, are they mushriks? He said, they came out of shirk. They became believers with me. I.e., they were mushriks, they were all idol worship, the Muslim. So they said, are they hypocrites then? So he said, hypocrites don't do dhikr at night. They did dhikr. So then he said, who are they then? They asked him, who are they then? He said, they are our very own dear brothers and sisters who have rebelled against us. And then he took the bodies of both camps, both sides, and he did the janazah and he buried them both. And then he sent Aisha with a guard, protect her all the way back to Medina. And Aisha, afterwards, she wept. She said, I wish Allah had allowed me to die before the Battle of the Camel, because she felt guilty about what had happened. On the way out, Talha and Zubair, the great companions, were all part of the 6, if you remember, also got killed. And so, straight from there, meanwhile in Syria, things were brewing. Muawiyah heard about this. Muawiyah now marched with his army out. And Ali radiallahu anhu carried on with his army towards Kufa. They met at a place called Siffin. And here again, the 2 armies met. Here again, Muawiyah's point was again, bring the perpetrators of the murder to justice. And you can imagine, in the army of Ali radiallahu anhu itself are those people. Who are they? Which ones are they? Naila, the wife of radiallahu anha, the wife of Uthman radiallahu anhu, when she was asked who was it, she said, I do not know. I cannot remember the faces. So you had to have a trial, you have to have the procedure. But Muawiyah said, no, bring them and we will. So they camped on opposite sides of a waterway, and the battle started. Again, a very intense battle. It lasted many days, about a week and a half. And at the end, Ali radiallahu anhu's forces appeared to be winning. And Muawiyah, somebody on Muawiyah's side, when they see the battle is almost lost, they take the Qur'an and they stick a spear through it and they hold it up and the shout goes out, let the Qur'an decide, let Allah decide between us. Stop the battle. Because they were losing. Very clever. Ali radiallahu anhu sees through this, so he's actually spurring, because if they win the battle, then there'll be calmness. The whole of the empire would be solid and he can then carry on doing what he did. But his own people in his own army said, let's stop. And he's saying, no, carry on. No, let's stop. And they stopped. So then Ali radiallahu anhu has no choice now but to stop the war. So he stops. And the 2 sides appoint a referee, an arbiter. So one appoints Amr bin al-As, radiallahu anhu, and the other one appoints. And again, Ali wanted to appoint somebody else, but instead his people around him, they appointed Abu Musa Ash'ari, as their arbiter. Now something happens for which I've spent about 2 years researching, because it's very important now. What happens is, these people have said, let Allah decide. The battle is over. In Ali's camp now, a big group, around 12,000 people, some say about 5,000 to 12,000 people, they break away. They say, how dare you, O Ali, decide on this matter which Allah decides on, and you've appointed a human being, Abu Musa Ash'ari. How dare you appoint a human in an area where Allah will decide? This is shirk. And that group started shouting, and they left Ali's camp. And that group we call the first known group of extremists. They're known as the Khawarij, from the root word kharaja, to leave, because they left Ali's camp. And they're a very, very interesting group, because they use Quranic evidences in the wrong way. And once Ali was in the mosque in Kufa, and one of the Khawarij said to him, judgment by Allah alone. The Quran says judgment by Allah alone. It's an ayah. Judgment by Allah alone. Judgment by Allah alone. And you choose a human to do this. Abu Musa Ash'ari. You chose Abu Musa Ash'ari. Judgment by Allah alone. And Ali says, a word of truth, i.e. an ayah, with a twisted interpretation. That's what extremists do. Yeah, a word of truth with a twisted interpretation. And they left. So Abu Musa Ash'ari, and you really feel for Abu Musa Ash'ari, really you do when you read this story. Because he is totally bowled out for six, as they say, with Amr bin al-As. Amr bin al-As is quick, sharp, astute, shrewd. So in this arbitration they have, this meeting to decide what's going to happen, Amr bin al-As says, look, we're not going to solve this, are we? Let both parties step down. Let both parties, let both Ali, let both Muawiyah step down, and let the Muslim Ummah choose a new leader. Okay, let me ask you a question. Was the battle to do with who was the leader? No. It had nothing to do with who was the leader. Maududi makes a brilliant point here. I mean, he says, the whole battle has nothing to do with who is a leader. It's to do with who murdered Uthman and bringing them to justice. That's what this group should have been talking about, these two. Instead, Amr bin al-As has manipulated the conversation to such a level that they're saying, well, okay, let both of them step down. Step down from what? Ali radiallahu anhu is the Khalifa, people have given him bay'ah. That's not the dispute. Muawiyah radiallahu anhu isn't saying to Ali, you should not be Khalifa. Nowhere in our history books do we have Muawiyah ever saying, it should be me. Nowhere. He's just saying, bring the perpetrators of the murder to trial. That's what they should have been talking about. Instead, they didn't. So here now, they decide, okay, let's both of them step down, the arbitrators. So then they're going to announce it. Now here, the story of the announcement, you'll find it everywhere. I asked, and I was told by a muhaddith that there is no chain for it. So it is weak, and you'll find it in many places. Basically what they say is Abu Musa Ash'ari stood up, and Amr bin al-As said to him, you announced. So Abu Musa Ash'ari stood up. We have decided that Ali radiallahu anhu should step down and Muawiyah should step down and let the people decide. And Amr bin al-As then stood up and he said, yes, that's what we've decided. And I say Muawiyah should be Khalifa. So apparently this story has no chain to it, or has a chain but it's weak. So Allah knows best, inshallah. So that arbitration really fizzled out. Muawiyah went back to Sham, Syria. Ali radiallahu anhu went with his army back to Kufa. And they carried on like that. Another year went down, and the Muslim Ummah is fragmented. The majority have accepted Ali as a Khalifa, but the Syrians have not. And this is an evidence for those people who say, and you'll get groups who say, we must all have one Khilafah. Yeah, you'll get groups who say one Khilafah. Well, here you have actually a situation during the time of the Sahaba where you have a whole state, Syria, without a Khalifa. Because they do not accept, they have not given bay'ah. And so life carries on like that, but at the same time now, Ali radiallahu anhu was facing a threat on the other side. This group, Khawarij, had gone out, and they are now seeking discontent. They are actually now arrived at a position, if you are not part of them, your iman is not correct. And so Ali radiallahu anhu now marches on against them. And a big battle happens in the Battle of Nahrawan. And again, Ali radiallahu anhu sends various companions to them to debate with them. So one debate, beautiful debate again, well worth a look. They say to them, you say humans cannot decide. Yes, humans cannot decide. So he says to them, Allah says in the Qur'an, when you fear a discord between husband and wife, appoint a human. What is this then? It's a human? So he's trying to coax some of them, and they did manage to, in 3 separate attempts, they managed to get a few thousand back, but a lot of them stayed where they are, and a big battle happened. And in this battle, Abu Sa'id al-Khudri narrates that he found the man who was supposed to be the founder of the Khawarij. The Prophet ﷺ had already predicted about them. The Prophet ﷺ had said about this extremist group, he said, you will find them, and your qira you will put to shame when you hear their qira, because they're so good, they're so pious, so seemingly pious, but their iman will shoot out like an arrow shoots out from a bow. So this is and it's not just for that time. Scholars have said that this warning is for all time, that we will always have nutters, extremists, who unfortunately will do this in our ummah. Now, we come now, these same people after the Battle of Nahrawan, they decided, right, there were 3 people they now viewed as kafir. So this is the length that extremists go to. They viewed Muawiyah as kafir, na'udhu billah, Ali radiallahu anhu as kafir, na'udhu billah, and Amr bin al-As radiallahu anhu as kafir. Why? They said Muawiyah and Ali have agreed to an arbitration, and arbitration is only for Allah. And Amr bin al-As was part of that arbitration, so all 3 should be killed. And so they sent 3 assassins to go kill them. And one of them, he went and he came to the mosque in the Kufa. It was during the time of Fajr. Ibn Muljam is waiting outside the mosque because he knows that Ali radiallahu anhu goes past this particular gate in the mosque of Kufa. It's Fajr, just before Fajr time, and as Ali radiallahu anhu goes past, he's already got his sword, he's already got his dagger, and he stabs him. And he keeps stabbing him, and then quickly people gather him, but Ali radiallahu anhu, the blood's now gushing to his head and everything, and he collapses, and he says, hold him. If I survive, then I will deal with him, but do not touch him, do not harm him. If I die, then you carry out the punishment. And he dies. And that's the end of, dies on the 17th of Ramadan, in the 40th year after Hijri. He was 63 years old, and he had been a Khalifa for 4 years and 9 months. This little boy of 10 years old who came into the house of the Prophet ﷺ, and 53 years later he meets his death at the hands of a man who was obsessed by the Qur'an. They say Ibn Muljam was reciting Quranic verses as he was stabbing Ali radiallahu anhu to death. And that's why I find this fascinating. Why have I researched it? Because I find it fascinating how extremists use Quran and Sunnah from 14 centuries ago, think they're doing something right, and they're killing the son-in-law of the Prophet ﷺ, the first cousin of the Prophet ﷺ, the man who the Prophet ﷺ said is like Harun was to Musa, he is to me. The one who is promised heaven, Ali radiallahu anhu. And they're killing him while reciting Quran. There has to be something seriously wrong with your understanding to do that. And that's the story of Ali radiallahu anhu. May Allah bless him and allow us to always follow his footsteps. Because without him, I think the Ummah would have been shattered to smithereens. Subhanallah.